You okay, Mike?
We've 30 seconds, Chair, and we'll start the meeting.
Okay.
Nah. Okay, Chair, we're ready to start the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Well, welcome to this, the second meeting of the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Scrutiny Panel. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube, so good evening, and also to any interested viewers that might be joining us for the meeting. The agenda and the associated papers for the meeting are all available on the council website, www.ashfield.gov.uk. Can we please ask for patience should the meeting move at a slightly slower pace as we work through the agenda and deal with any possible technical issues along the way. To ensure the audio for the meeting is as clear as possible, we will be muting all microphones as a default setting to keep background noise to a minimum. When wishing to speak, I would be grateful if members could raise their hand and wait to be invited to speak by myself. Your microphone will then be unmuted and you will be able to speak. Members will be voting by raising their hands. If members could raise their hands when they want to speak to indicate they are, when voting, can you raise your hands to indicate that you're either in favour of the motion, against the motion, or wishing to abstain. So we now move to agenda one. The agenda item one is to receive apologies for absence. Can I ask Mike if there's any apologies that have been submitted?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item two is to consider any declarations of disclosable pecuniary or personal interest and non-disclosable pecuniary or other interest. Can I ask if there has been any declarations?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item three is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the last meeting held on the 30th of July 2020. Can I have someone to officially move the minutes, please? Councillor Blagden, and someone to second it, please. Okay, thank you, Councillor Grounds. Those in favour, please indicate. Those against? Those abstaining? That's clearly carried. Thank you very much, committee. Agenda item 4. At the last meeting of the panel, members set the work plan for the areas of consideration over the coming months. It was agreed that this meeting would focus on updates from the council service areas, the impact on those services and the recovery plans. In addition to this meeting being streamed live on YouTube, I've also asked on social media for any questions from the community. Those that have been submitted will be put forward tonight alongside questions from the panel. In attendance tonight, we have members of the senior management team and the chief executive. Therefore, I wish to express my thanks for their attendance tonight. And I think it just goes to show the importance that the council do attach to this committee and the work we're doing. I would like now to bring in the Vice Chair, Councillor Blagden, to provide the panel with an update on the memorial to commemorate and honour the unstinting commitment and bravery shown by all key workers and volunteers during the pandemic. Councillor Blagden.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I also thank all the officers for attending tonight, please, and giving the time up. It really shows a dedication. Chairman, following the last meeting of the panel, we are in the early stages of exploring the work required to support the development of a permanent memorial in the district. We have already met with the Assistant Director for Planning to discuss any possible future funding options to support this. Any requirements for 106 would need to be programmed into place and communities for prioritisation. I've got that round me gob all night, but I've got it right. This
Well done,
would feed into the responses to the consultation on planning and applications. There was an appropriate application linked to the anticipated site. There would be the potential for this to be sourced from public realm improvements associated with the development proposal. These opportunities may not be regular and would also be dependent upon the progress of the planning application and delivery of the development site. There may also be opportunities for partnership work in relation to specific developments to incorporate or commemorate key workers. In the coming weeks, we'll be arranging further meetings with officers to establish the appropriate steps required before making a formal recommendation. I will update the panel accordingly, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blagden. I know that it was something that Councillor Rostons the Elder, let's call you, raised at the last meeting, which was because we were talking about an NHS memorial, and Councillor Rostons quite rightly made the point that we should be we should be commemorating and remembering all key workers. So that will be reflected. Has anyone got any questions specific to the COVID memorial? Do you want to indicate? Okay, no problem at all. So can I now bring in the Chief Executive, Carol Cooper-Smith? She's going to say a few words regarding the Council's response to the pandemic and impact on services and staff. And before I do, can I just say that I'm sat in a very empty Ashfield District Council council chamber. This is the first meeting that has been chaired since the middle of March. From the meeting, I felt that it was appropriate that we would do that during this meeting. So I'm delighted to welcome our Chief Executive, Carol Cooper-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a few brief words. It's very difficult to summarise the last 4 or 5 months, even 6 months, but I'm going to try. I want to start by stating the obvious, that COVID-19 pandemic put us in an area that none of us had ever been in before. It was a much used word, unprecedented, both organisationally and for the communities and nationally as well. Nobody's ever been through this before in living memory. And of course, Chair, this was particularly felt by all of us when very early on in the pandemic, we lost Tony. And that was felt very keenly across the entire council, members and officers alike. During the initial response to the pandemic, the priority consideration, in fact, the only consideration for the council, was the impact on the people of Ashfield, both in terms of the hardships that some were suffering, but also the need to maintain access to services that were a real lifeline for people, for most people in the community. So right from the start, our priority as a management team was to continue to deliver essential frontline services for our residents. And it was by working as one council and an Ashfield family that we achieved this during the whole of the pandemic. We identified our must deliver services, both frontline and support services. One of the early things we did was to call for volunteers across the council so that we could redeploy into areas of specific need. Immediately, about 100 people came forward to volunteer, particularly for work they'd never actually done before. And they were willing to put themselves out of their own comfort zones to do work that they wouldn't traditionally have done. And so we had community protection officers working the bins. We had environmental litter pickers and grass cutters digging graves, unfortunately. And the housing officers, place team officers and the executive assistants, I would say, did all of the heavy lifting on our considerable humanitarian effort. I went out with a bulky waste team and pest control. And I can recommend going out with the frontline services. It makes a change from sitting behind your desk, I can tell you. And you know that you've done a day's work at the end of it. Throughout all of this, the staff at Ashfield have been absolutely exceptional. I would say they've all gone above and beyond. They've delivered all of our essential services, despite many difficulties. Staff have quickly adapted to new working conditions, in particular, working from home. I think if you'd asked most of the staff in February, do you think you could do your job at home? 90% of them would have said no. Whereas they just adapted straight away to brand new working conditions. So the people who could work from home did. Where it wasn't possible, we quickly had to implement things like social distancing, so that, for example, in the bin wagons, we had 2 operatives in the cab with one behind in a van. It's a bit like the Right Said Fred song. So we just had to adapt to different working conditions. All of this was to ensure delivery of essential services and ongoing consistency in the quality of what we were providing to the public. So it wasn't just about the quantity of what we were doing, it was about maintaining the quality of services to the public. We kept the offices and the depot open for staff who both wanted to and needed to come in. And I think you're probably sick of us saying this, but we are the only council in Nottinghamshire to have delivered all essential services throughout the pandemic, plus COVID-related services. I'm proud of every single person that works for Ashfield Council, and I'd also like to thank members for the support that you've given during this pandemic, because I know you've still been foot slogging around communities, doing your own community work. We led on delivering humanitarian aid, mostly through our volunteer team. It was mostly food parcels. And one of our rooms, I think the Portland room, the one on the bottom floor, it was filled from floor to ceiling with food, tin goods, toiletries, and the staff had to put those together in boxes. But a lot of the time, people wanted welfare telephone calls, just a call from the staff to see how they were, the kind of befriending service, because they weren't getting any visits from friends and family at the time. And a lot of people were incredibly isolated. So I heard Lindsay Kenworthy and Dora Chadwick countless times on the phone to elderly people, just checking that they were okay and giving them a friendly ear. Aldi gave us 100 Easter eggs, so we got some very generous donations from people to put in the food parcels. Particularly, I would like to thank the voluntary and community sectors of Ashfield, who were absolutely magnificent, really stepped up to the mark. They delivered prescriptions, they helped us with food parcels, they administered the food banks, and generally they became a community lifeline for our residents. And they were absolutely brilliant, and I thank them enormously. Around £20 million worth of essential grants were distributed to small businesses to help them cope with the loss of business and the loss of income. And that trips really easily off the tongue, but our finance and Revs and Ben's team put an enormous shift in to get that money out of the door. It all needed checking that it was going to the right people and the right places to avoid anybody getting money that they shouldn't have. And generally 20 million quid out of the door in 5 months is a remarkable achievement. As a corporate management team, we've participated on the regional strategic approaches to both to the pandemic and to recovery with our partner authorities, central government and other service providers, such as the police and the health service. We've been on countless numbers of local resilience forum cells, several a day, ongoing. They continue to meet on a weekly basis, but now the emphasis has shifted more to local outbreak control. All our services continue to move forward in our recovery plans as we learn lessons from the pandemic, and that will shape our priorities and our services moving forward. Finally, Chair, I would like to put on record, and I'm speaking on behalf of the corporate management team, that we fully support the work of this panel. It's a great platform to help us assess how we responded to the pandemic in the first place and the impact this will have on services moving forward, and also how we apply lessons learned in case we have such an emergency again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Carol. Before I bring in members, I'd like to ask Carol as Chief Executive what this council are doing in terms of preparations for a second wave, and what lessons have we learned from our initial reaction to the pandemic?
Right. We've put systems in place to help us cope with sporadic outbreaks, because the information currently that we've got is that there will be further outbreaks of COVID. It could be that it's sporadic around households or places of employment, rather than a more general wave, which is what we saw in March, April and May. So we've now moved to a cellular structure of daily calls with a COVID outbreak cell structure, which our environmental health officers are involved in. So it's kind of moved from the strategic to the operational to deal with specific outbreaks. So we get early warning systems from the Director of Public Health. So every week we get a briefing which shows us the figures for the whole of Nottinghamshire. So you can see how things are moving. In March, we didn't know what had hit us, nobody did. Whereas now we've got a lot more intelligence on the ground, so that we can see what's coming and where it's coming from. Outbreaks can hit you at any time. It could be a workplace related outbreak, or it could be a specific community related outbreak, or it literally could be a street or a collection of families. We just don't know. All we can do is to look at the figures as they're arising and work with our local Ashfield Council experts in order to deal with it when it happens. We also have economic development and town centre officers who visit businesses constantly to advise them on COVID secure measures. We've employed somebody specifically to work with retailers, but we've also been to food outlets and also gone out to food factories. We have no right to demand that people work with us. We have no legal responsibility, but people are very keen to work with the council, and they're very keen to work with us to access whatever advice they can to keep their own workplaces safe. Other lessons that we've learned, I've asked our communications team to have an autumn campaign about COVID safety. So you'll see lots of messages going out on Facebook and Twitter and on the website. Other things, we know that we can deliver essential services plus COVID-related humanitarian aid. So if something did happen, it wouldn't take us long to gear up again for that kind of wave of essential services plus humanitarian. Another issue is we need to switch as many residents as possible onto working with us digitally. Members will know that we've got a big digital service transformation effort going on at the minute. If we can get the bulk of the population digitally enabled and digitally connected, we can get messages out to them immediately. It's very difficult otherwise. You can't leaflet the entire population, but if we've got people who've got apps and websites, we can deal with it a lot easier. The other thing, we know we can rely on our voluntary and community sector partners, so that's something we'll do very early on next time, and we'll get them involved in planning. And lastly, because of all the humanitarian work that we've done, we know who our most vulnerable residents are, and we can work with them early because we know who they are, and we can go to them before they need to come to us.
Thank you very much, Carol. Is there anyone specifically that would like to raise any issues with Carol before we widen it out to questions from the public and then questions from yourselves to all service directors? Councillor Blagden. Councillor Rossens after that, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. The council sought engagement from the voluntary community sector. Has that involvement remained steady, Carol, throughout the pandemic and into the easing of the lockdown? I mean, I know the Hucknall Food Bank was heavily involved in it and were absolutely magnificent. In fact, I think they created a community spirit not been seen since the Second World War. But yeah, have we still got involvement? Are we still with them?
Yes, we are. And we want to continue working with the voluntary and community sector as well. I mean, they really kept the food banks going, and I know it's a shame that we need food banks, but we do, and it's thanks to their effort that we didn't actually run out. So yes, it's created a better working relationship with the voluntary community sector because we know we can work with them at a strategic level as well as an operational level. So as I've said, that if this happens again, we can get them into a much early stage so that they can help us with the planning.
Thank you, Carol. Councillor Rostance.
Hi, Carol. Yeah, thank you for that. A lot of support that we did locally in Hucknall was for people sort of self-isolating, but now that has changed to people that as circumstances have changed, they've lost their jobs, and we're now supporting lots and lots more people that are in different circumstances than they were before. Is that the same over Ashfield, and what are we doing to support those? I know what we're doing in Hucknall to support them, but is that across the whole of Ashfield?
I've not actually seen any of the figures, and I know people are very concerned about coming out of furlough and being made redundant. We're working with the DWP at the minute. As you know, we share an office with them, and I have regular meetings with them. The last thing we want is for people to be socially isolated and not to know where to go. The hub at the County Council is still operational. So if people do need specific help and support, they can contact the hub, and the hub will then contact us with any elements of support that are needed from people. What I understand is that the people contacting the hub at the minute have got much more in terms of complex needs. So in the early days, it was people isolating who needed food parcels, whereas now they've got a range of complex needs. I think we'd be happy to know if people were needing help, and we would then be able to put them onto various agencies that could help. So, for example, if they're struggling to pay their rent, then we'd want to know so that we could plug them into the housing team before it gets too late. If they require befriending help, then we can put them onto the voluntary sector. So yeah, we do need to know, and we can work with people.
Yeah, we've got Teresa Hodgkinson and Craig Bonner would also like to contribute to this.
Okay, it'd be useful if the service directors initially, just to assist people who are watching on the YouTube channel, just explained their department, please. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah. I'm Teresa Hodgkinson, the Director of Place and Communities, and it's in relation to Councillor Rostance's in the community across Ashfield, not just the community, but also the business community. And you'll see within your report today that we have commissioned a piece of work to look at the economic recovery of Ashfield, and there's some highlighted information within your pack today that starts giving some indication of the areas that we need to work with. And as Carol says, we've set up a hub, and that hub will remain there to support the business community. But the council recently have made an investment into the economic development team. So we've got 2 full-time officers that now work in that hub that will be supporting businesses and supporting the business community. So some of the early indications that are coming from Experian is that we're looking at losing around 2,500 jobs across Ashfield. So we're looking at that already and seeing how we can support them. Initially, and you'll hear from Pete Hudson throughout this, in relation to giving out the government grants that we've been giving to support the businesses. That has been initially had a real impact on supporting them, but the longer term, there are going to be people that's going to be losing the roles as soon as we come out of furlough and redundancies are being made, and we're gearing ourselves up through this economic development plan to be geared up and able to support businesses and support companies in preparation for that.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Can I bring Craig Bonner in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Director for Resources and Business Transformation. Just picking up from what Carol said and Councillor Roston's about unemployed and the support that we can hopefully provide. As we all know, that this has been particularly devastating for young people. And there is a scheme that you might have noticed got launched yesterday, Kickstart Scheme, which is just where the government's putting support in for what's unfortunately likely to be long-term unemployed young persons, that they can go on work placements for 6 months, 25 hours a week, which will be paid. And in the next week or so, we will be in dialogue and discussion with the DWP about how we can fully support that across the whole district.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I'm now going to bring in Mike Joy, who's just going to give us an overview of the report, and then what we'll do is we'll move on to questions from the public before we open up the meeting. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. We've kind of gone a step ahead before with opening up to questions.
Yeah.
So I think with regards to obviously the council senior management team, they're all requested to provide a specific service update with an emphasis on impact and recovery, which you'll see within your report from pages 11 to 40. I think of note from members within this update is the local outbreak control plans, which set out the arrangements for local surveillance and the actions that will be taken in response to local outbreaks should they occur. Now, this is a document that we're required to be consistently updated to ensure that it keeps abreast of all of the local happenings, and that's something that we work with Notts County Council on. I think the report also outlines the COVID-19 government funding, which has been provided by Pete Smith, which also sets out all of our COVID-related costs, and that is something that is being monitored by the council closely. I know time is quite limited, and I know you want to get into the meat of the meeting really, with regards to those questions from both the public, from our social media outputs, and both from members. So I think the only thing I wanted to say, Chair, was that members should be aware that at the moment we have had full participation and engagement from all of our senior management team and all of the officers within their teams. However, there are still some unknowns. So some of the questions that may be coming in tonight or that may be posed, we may not have all of the answers at this particular moment in time. And should that be the case, we'll obviously work closely with the service directors and ensure that when that has been looked into in more detail, we can get a written response out to the panel members.
Thank you, Mike. We're going to I'm going to go to questions from the public. So what I'll do is I will ask in turn. So I'll ask the first question, then Councillor Blagden, and then etc. as Vice Chair. So the first question comes from a trader on Outram Street. As a local trader in Sutton, can I thank Ashfield District Council for their support getting the £10,000 business grant? What ongoing support are we planning to provide for local businesses? And I was wondering if Teresa might want to start us on that. Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, I welcome the thanks for that. There's a lot of hard work gone in behind the scenes with the finance team and the other teams supporting to get those grants out the door to support those businesses. I think it's the opportunity that we have is that we've been working through the COVID-19 at the moment, but we are coming now where we need to start working with the businesses. And I put the businesses in two categories. So the question from the Outram Street is in relation to retail, I would understand. So we was in a fortunate position that we got 114,000 from the government to look at reopening the high streets and supporting. And as part of that, we've employed an officer, an information officer that's supporting all our businesses in the town centres. So they're actually working with every business, knocking on every business's door in a social distancing way, giving them literature to see how we can support them. There's been a number of other initiatives, and probably one that I'd like to highlight, that we took a decision, the council did early on, around free parking, in opening up all our car parking so that it was free to everybody to use. And I think the legacy from that is that because that was such a success, and it was very well received, not only by the customers, but also by the traders within our town centres, that we've made a commitment from the 7th of September to have 2 hours free parking ongoing from here after, which is a huge commitment from this council. I think from a business support, we set up the hub, the business support hub, which has a number of offices in there, and we will continue with that. We've put more resource into that, and we welcome businesses to contact that hub, whether it's for financial support, whether it's on guidance around environmental health issues, any guidance that they want. We have got that hub set up, and supporting that is a website with clear information on there and guidance that we regularly supply to all our business customers. So I think that's the legacy, is that we've already set up a hub and we'll continue with that, and that'll evolve. And I think the most important thing is, and I've already, in my earlier questioning, was around the economic recovery plan. It's going to be so crucial for us as a council to understand the landscape and where we need to put our resources in the future. And whilst we've set up some of those linear processes in order to do that, that is work in progress. And I did refer to the pack that we have in relation to the headings, whether that's looking at supporting businesses or developing skills and enterprise. I think one of the things that I would like to add to that is that we've got a huge opportunity, and all members and officers and also consultation with the public, is we've got an opportunity through the Towns Fund and the Future High Street Fund to look at how we have an economic impact on our town centres and on our districts, particularly in Sutton and Kirkby. We're fortunate to be through to the next stages of some of those funding, which is significant money. And we've had to reevaluate really where we set off on that journey to start looking at how that can support the recovery as well, as part of that. I could go on forever in relation to the support, and Carol's been quite right, the support that we've given to businesses, but I think it'd be worth handing over to Pete so we could talk a bit about the grants that we've given out and some of the impact that that's had positively on some of those businesses. It stopped some businesses going, closing, or and the feedback that we're having, and that's starting off with your question, was nice to receive that actually getting some compliments back and getting that feedback. So it's really, heartwarming really that we can have some success stories that come out of this.
Right, thank you, Teresa. And before I bring Pete in, I know that it was raised at the last meeting, the second tranche of the business grants, and this committee did express concern over the 15% property on cost. I'm aware that was been dropped down to 5%, which has enabled a number of small businesses, especially businesses that work from home, that are based at the to be able to tap into at least some money. So on behalf of this committee, thank you, Pete, to the Revenues and Benefits team for the excellent work you did, and I'd like to bring you in.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think the grant that was being referred to in the question to Teresa was the small business grant, which is one of the grants that has been made available by the government, in addition to the retail, hospitality and leisure grants. So in total, they amount to almost £19 million. And then in addition to that, we were given a one-off allocation for our discretionary grant scheme, which is what you've just been referring to in terms of meeting criteria, in terms of levels of fixed costs and also loss of income in terms of how much we can pay out from that discretionary grant scheme. The scheme was put in place because the government recognised that there were a number of businesses that were falling through the cracks and so weren't able to access the small business grants and retail, hospitality and leisure. So it was a way of mitigating some of that pressure. Unfortunately, even with the discretionary grant in place, it still doesn't cover everyone. There will still be businesses that won't be eligible for some form of financial support. With regard to our discretionary grant allocation, it was £1,078,000, and the panel so far has paid out just over £700,000 of that. We are still working through applications. We're having to go back to some businesses where we require additional information, and all of the payments will have gone out by the end of September, which is a requirement of government.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, okay, we're going to go to the next question. So I'd like Councillor Blagden to pose this one, and it's going to Pete and Teresa.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is from Janet in Kirkby. How much revenue did the council lose by extending free parking until now? What effect did this have in places like Kirkby? Do we think it helped to increase visitors to our shops?
Do you want me to take that, Teresa?
Yeah, if you take the first bit, Pete, in relation to the funding, and then I will give some feedback on the information that we've had from the public and how it's been received.
Okay, right. So in total, the forecast amount of lost income from car parking for this year will be £93,000. It's made up of two elements. So £68,000 is income that we anticipate that we've lost as a result of having free car parking right through to September in response to the pandemic and trying to increase footfall as much as possible for our local businesses. The second amount is £25,000 loss, and that's based on us introducing 2-hour free car parking from September till the end of the financial year. So there's two distinct elements.
Thank you very much. Teresa, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I previously spoke about the free parking and the benefits that it had, but yes, initially the feedback that we've had gave the shoppers confidence to be able to go into our town centres and the social distancing measures that have been put in place. So it was well received, and it helped our thinking about the future investment into the 2 hours free parking. And not only did it give the shoppers the confidence and increase footfall at this very difficult time, it really helped, more importantly, the traders to continue trading. And that's something we were looking at supporting. And that's why we really welcome the free parking beyond this, that it's just not through the COVID situation that we're actually continuing that permanently now for 2 hours free parking in all our town centre car parks.
Thank you, Teresa. And as I say, we'll get through the questions from the public, and then we're going to open it up to the committee. But just to say that I was in Sutton yesterday, just walking around speaking to some of the traders, and they were virtually unanimous. Well, as I say, virtually, they were unanimous in the praise for Trevor Middleton and all the help that he's given to residents in Sutton, in Kirkby, and in Hucknall. So I'd like to put on record our thanks to Trev. And I know that he's pulled from pillar to post, but I certainly know that he's done an excellent job. And so I'll email him on behalf of this committee, if that's okay with members of the panel, just to make that point. Now we've the next question is from a gentleman in Hucknall, and we've sort of covered it slightly through Carol. But I was wondering if any members of the leadership would like to comment about the preparations for a second wave and what lessons can we learn from the initial lockdown. So I don't know if any officers would like to speak to this, or should we move to the next question?
We've got Paul Parkinson, Ruth Dennis and Craig Bonner. Jet.
Okay, so Paul, do you want to kick off? Paul?
No?
Yeah,
Paul Parkinson, Director of Housing and Assets, Deputy Chief Executive, and I headed up the Humanitarian Aid during the COVID crisis. So in terms of second wave, the Humanitarian Aid Group is working on currently a rapid resource assessment which will look at what resources we've got to hand as and when a second wave occurs. So that will look at what is our relationship with the voluntary sector, what's the capacity within the voluntary sector, what resources has the district council got to deal with local residents, and what resources has the county council got as well to support the humanitarian hub at the centre of the call centre that brings in the referrals for the humanitarian aid. So we are assessing and reviewing what we've got. The humanitarian aid did work really well. So so we think we've bedded in really well, and we should be able to carry on the success we had originally. The other key area for housing is a second wave, could potentially be homelessness, we believe. So that interchanges between what's happening with evictions at the moment. So currently there's no court evictions, which actually reduces homelessness because everybody keeps their tenancy at the moment. So regardless of whether they're paying the rent, have a job, not have a job, they're currently not being evicted. But obviously homeless people, rough sleepers, do need to come in off the streets to lower potential cross infections and catching the COVID. So we have some current temporary accommodation on standby that we had from last time. We're currently up to 40 units of temporary accommodation. We're keeping some of those on standby. So should a second wave occur, we are ready to take on board more rough sleepers or those threatened with rough sleeping. So those are the main two areas of where we see potential pinch points should any second wave come out.
Thank you, Paul. Can I bring Craig in? Craig Bonner, please.
Thank you. It was more to do with the lessons learned. I think to me, the biggest lesson we've all learned is how incredibly resilient the organisation, has been and is in terms of pulling together, leadership, managers, employees, unions, support of HR. As Carol said earlier, it's been exemplary, and we've certainly learned a hell of a lot from that. In terms of moving forward, the other, to me, massive change is the organisational culture change, and that we've now proved and proven that we can work in totally different ways, which we'll have to adopt and embed as we move forward, and it's placing us in a really good position to be able to do that. So yeah, and just on the second wave, just in terms of staffing, we will continue to monitor daily at the moment in terms of impact on staff. So if there's a second wave, we will continue to be able to red flag any concerns and continue to redeploy and put the energies and capacity and resources to areas of greatest need.
Thank you, Craig. We've got Ruth next. Ruth Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Director of Legal and Governance. As part of the response and recovery, I've been sitting on the strategic coordinating group. So members will recall when I came to the meeting in July, we explained the structure under the Local Resilience Forum. So that is the way that the multi-agency partners all come together to manage these major incidents. So having sat on the SCG throughout the whole of the pandemic, we actually met again this morning. And I think what obviously that group is now doing is focusing both on outbreak planning, which is those small isolated groups of outbreaks, but also looking for a more widespread, so be more prepared for a more widespread second wave, which could come across county or obviously nationally. So it's very much continuing to ensure that it is looking forward in terms of a wider second wave. So whilst a lot of the groups and the group structures have gone into sort of hibernation or a meeting less frequently, what the plans are in place are to obviously ramp that back up if it's needed. So the structures are all there in place to come back into being on a more frequent basis if and when they're necessary. So the structures that we've been able to plan and improve throughout the whole of the sort of 6 months so far are now being fine-tuned and looking forward for that potential second wave. So members should be comfortable that those structures are there for us to react very quickly if that's needed as part of a second wave.
Thank you, Ruth. It'd just be helpful for members and people watching on the YouTube channel. Would you just explain what SCG means, please?
The Strategic Coordinating Group. Essentially, it's the way that you try and ensure that everything underneath it runs in a smooth way, and it's there to make decisions at a higher multi-agency level. So multi-agency obviously covers district councils, county, fire, police, health, etc. So it's how we all come together to make sure that we plan properly, obviously with one single aim in mind.
Thank you very much. And before I bring in Carol, just to finish off this question, I'd like to thank her for volunteering to do a day a week with the bulky waste team. So Carol, can I bring you in?
Ruth and I have volunteered to go out with the grave diggers next time. So we've told them, and they've just told them to brace themselves, because we're coming with a digger. So yeah, the grave diggers next, and then we'll be out with the litter pickers. So I think it's important, because the operational teams have really kept us going through all of this. So it's important that we show our support by getting our hands dirty occasionally. Yeah, so Ruth and I we've told them, and they've said it's okay, so we're going after the appropriate health and safety training, of course. I just want to back up what everybody else has said in answer to the question from Trevor. There's always lessons that you can learn. We're never going to get it 100% right all of the time, but I think we've got it right for the bulk of the time. And the reason we've got it right is because the staff have all pulled together. The staff and the partners and the voluntary sector, it really has been a one Ashfield approach. And depending on what happens next time, we may have to react differently. But I think the confidence I've got is that we're ready.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'm going to bring in Councillor Blagden again. He's going to ask a question from Nicola. Jim?
Yeah, it's from Nicola. The staff are not looked after with PPE equipment. Can the council respond to this, please?
Okay, can I bring in, let's take Craig first, and then we'll take Carol. Craig?
Yeah, what happened way back in lockdown, way back in March, we monitored at that time daily the levels of PPE stock levels, and we identified any issues, and then we redeployed any PPE from certain areas to areas of greatest need, and that carried on for quite a considerable period of time, because I think all members will recall that there was a national significant concern about provision of PPE or lack of provision of PPE, which I think has continued throughout the whole pandemic. What also happened through that was because of the understandable anxieties expressed by staff about what PPE did they need, and the sort of change in guidance, was that all Nottinghamshire local authorities, they all agreed a list to identify exactly what PPE was required for specific tasks, to give that sort of reassurance. And that's been in place for months now. I'm certainly not aware that at any time, whilst it got a bit close to the bone, I'm certainly not aware that we ever actually ran out of required PPE or weren't able to provide it. And I'm certainly not aware of any situations where we ever placed a member of staff in a situation without the required PPE. Certainly not aware of any issues at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Carol?
I would back up everything that Craig has said. We delivered PPE to people on the basis of what they needed. And we've always had reasonably good stocks of hand wash and gel, masks where needed. We've even had the full body suits where they've been required. We've had various types of masks, depending on, as Craig says, what the level of job requirements were. So we've gone with what the experts, health and safety experts, have told us. So it has been on the basis of need, and we haven't run out of anything. So if the questioner has got further information, then by all means email us. But as far as Craig and I and the rest of the management team's aware, we haven't run out of PPE, and people have had access to what they have needed for the jobs that they're in.
Okay, I think this might be a case of residents getting confused, because I know certainly it was raised with us that caretakers at schools and cleaners didn't have the right PPE. However, that is not an issue for Ashfield District Council. That's very much an issue for Nottinghamshire County Council. Thank you, Carol. I'm going to make swift progress because I want to bring in as many members as possible. So just the last couple of questions. By far, the most popular question, and I'm going to ask it anyway, even though it was the responsibility of the district council, and I invite members of the team to give us their opinion on it. Okay, this is from a Simon and a Carl. What are the 20 miles an hour restrictions in place for? By definition, you social distance in a car, and it also dilutes the actual messaging. I think this is referring to, as I say, the restriction of speed limits down from 30 to 20 in places like Sutton Town Centre, Kirkby and Hucknall. So I don't know if any members of the team want to answer this one.
We've got Teresa Hodgkinson, Chair.
Okay, yeah. Teresa.
Thank you, Chair. It was actually a Nottinghamshire-wide initiative that was set up as part of the Public Realm Working Group, and it was set in place to give motorists the awareness and the confidence within the town centres. It was ahead of whether the pandemic got worse, and if we had to put in more social distancing measures where we had to separate pedestrians more, it was put in place to start conditioning him towards that thinking. Fortunately, we was in a position where we didn't have to implement it, but it was put in as a prevention measurage to start building confidence and getting motorists used to that. So it was a county-wide initiative, but as a district, we did assist with that as part of that group.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. I'm going to move straight on to Councillor Blagden.
Yep, this is from Nidji from Kirkby. How come everywhere is open, but you can't walk into Kirkby Council or the police station?
Okay, can I ask Craig to tackle this one?
Yeah, in accordance with the government guidance, we have to provide and produce a risk assessment for all our offices and enclosed public spaces. And as you can imagine, that takes into full account requirements to do with social distancing, hygiene, maximum numbers we can allow in the building at any one time, recording people's contact details, for example. So in order to provide that safe environment, both to visitors and to staff, we've had to restrict access, which we're coordinating at the moment through an appointment-only basis. So where really required, a customer can visit the council offices, but by appointment. We can't offer open walk-up access because to do that, we couldn't guarantee the safety of that visitor nor the staff, and it wouldn't comply with the risk assessments that we have to have in place.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Right, well, that's all the questions from the public. Just to say that to any residents watching on the YouTube channel live or in the future, any other questions that you have submitted, I will put to the relevant officers, and you will get an answer. With regards to, I've got about 15 different questions which we've submitted to various officers at Nottinghamshire County Council, so I will tackle those questions. So thank you to members of the public, and don't forget, by the way, that you can email us at any time with any queries, and we'll always be happy to answer them. Right, what I'm going to do now is open it up to the panel. So if you'd like to indicate if you'd like to speak, what I'll do is I'll go through the members. So I'd like to start with Councillor Grounds. Councillor Grounds, have you got any queries you'd like to raise with the senior officers? You're quite happy. Okay. Councillor Kevin Rostons. Councillor Rostons.
Yeah, one of the concerns that's been raised with me is the actual social distancing with the opening of the pubs. I think it's been raised a few times that sort of social distancing and alcohol don't really make a good mix. I don't know if our licensing people are able to keep control over that, but it's I think in some areas it seemed to be getting out of hand. I don't know what we can do to sort of just keep an eye on things now. It's nice to see all the pubs and restaurants all open again, but it's just something that I think we just need to monitor for the future in case we do get another spike, and I don't think that will help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And just to say that we did have specific problems at the Devonshire, which is on high pavement in Sutton and Ashfield, and I've got to say that between Julian and Christine Saris, they worked very well. They worked with the landlord and landlady of the Devonshire. They worked with Marston's, the brewery, and touch wood, and I'm touching the wood in the council chamber. Touch wood, there's been no problem since, and I don't know if Carol wants to sort of speak a little bit more about that. Carol?
That was the example I was going to give.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all, not at all. Basically, Councillor Rostons, we receive complaints about a specific pub on high pavement. So our licensing manager went in with the police, and we met the brewery, Marston's. My view was shut the pub for the weekend, which caused a bit of consternation in the brewery, but they agreed to put in various measures in order to alleviate the situation. It was a lack of social distancing and crowds of people coming to that pub from outside the area. What I'd say is, if you've got specific concerns about any pubs in Hucknall, let us know and we'll have a look at them. And I've not heard any other complaints about this particular pub since. But if you do have any instances, we can send Julie and Alison in.
Thank you, Carol. Is there any other officers that would like to comment on that, or can we move to Councillor Shaw? Just to give you an update, by the way, on the Staff of Life in Sutton that's still not reopened. I'm aware that Star Pubs, courtesy of the publicity that the council got for the brewery, are now shortlisted for new landlords. So we're hoping that pub will be reopened. And I've got to say that the common sense approach by this council has allowed the Devonshire to remain open. And as I say, touch wood, there's been no problem. So I'd like to now, Councillor Austin, does that answer your question? Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Shaw, Councillor Daisy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Committee, for letting me speak. On this subject, there's been a few issues in and around the Nabs Lane new pub. Is it door 57? And the car parking outside that pub, especially across the zigzag part of the zebra crossing, and sometimes on the zebra crossing itself. So that needs to be looked at. Also, just a question to the senior officers. You spoke earlier about homelessness and people being on the streets. Have we seen an upsurge of people that have got no access to public funding being picked up by any street outreach teams anywhere in the district? Thank you.
Okay. Is there any senior officer that would like to answer that question?
Can I answer the first one and then ask Paul to speak on the second one in terms of homelessness? On Nabs Lane, I saw Teresa making notes at that point, so we'll ask one of our CPOs to go and have a look down there. So because parking on a zigzag's not acceptable, so that we can think about that.
Okay, Paul.
Okay, yeah, homelessness. So as I alluded to earlier, it's actually a double-edged sword, homelessness. So when the eviction ban came in, actually homeless referrals went down. But what we did have was a requirement called everybody in, which is where we had to bring in every single member of the rough sleeping community and anybody threatened with rough sleeping. So we have about 4 or 5 people in Ashfield that are known to us that do rough sleep, and all those were brought in, and all of them, I'm pleased to say, are still being housed and offered support. So that's a real success story of the COVID issue there, that we've kept those people from going back to rough sleeping, and we're trying to offer them the help and support they need. It's not just about it's often related to mental health, addiction, substance addiction. So there's lots of required. What we didn't truly know was how many people were sofa surfing and just staying with friends who are threatened with rough sleeping. So they don't hold a legal tenancy, so can be kicked out the property at any time, and obviously people got concerned if a non-family member was in the household, so we did ask them to leave. They can legitimately do that, and we had just under 40 people present under those circumstances, and again, we have helped every single one of those, and the majority are endeavouring to move into long-term stable housing. So again, we've dealt with the homelessness situation as it stands. In terms of moving forward, we did get some grant early on from the government, which we put to good use. That enabled us to get more boots on the ground to help these people, offer more support, more special needs support. And we work very closely with some agencies, drug and alcohol agencies, support agencies, Framework Housing, in particular YMCA. And again, at this point in time, there's more money available from the government, and Ashfield itself, Ashfield Council, is putting in for a grant for more properties for what we call move-on accommodation. So that's bringing people in off the street, giving them somewhere to stay where they can receive stable support, and then they can move on to a more stable tenancy. And also we've made a bid in conjunction with Framework as well to access some money as well. So there's more support coming into the district at this point in time, but obviously it's in the hands of MHCLG at this point in time, but the bids have gone in.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to bring in Caroline next, Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Smallbridge, and then Councillor John Wilmot, who one of our cabinet members. I'm going to bring him in. So can I bring in Councillor Wilkinson? Is there anything that you would like to raise, Councillor?
Yes, there is. I think Paul's answered a few of it. Thank you for letting me speak, Chairman, as well. It's about housing, and if we have a lot of people who are made redundant in Ashfield, we're thinking a minimum of 2,500. When the banks start to repossess these homes, which they will do by next year, and we have an influx of homeless or families that are needing permanent residence, where are we going to be? Are we going to have a plan in place so these people are not having to go in bed and breakfast or families be split up?
Thank you, Paul. Just wait for your mic to come on. There we go.
Okay. Well, hopefully no families get split up. We try and accommodate people as best we can. So that's the first point there. We try and keep family units together. We have kept, we put into circulation some additional temporary accommodation to help with the homeless issue. As I said, we've moved a lot of those homeless people off to more secure accommodation in our own stock, but into the private sector as well. So we do have properties available that can deal with a modest influx of people becoming potentially homeless. Our stock is obviously limited to those people that leave the stock. So obviously we can't just magic up new properties. Somebody has to leave before somebody moves in. So we don't have housing on tap by no means at all. So the next port of call then is obviously to go to other housing providers in the area that may have houses available, but unfortunately after that it becomes bed and breakfast, which we all know is not that suitable, not that great, but we do have officers available, and we're using some of the grants we've got to employ, or we're ready to employ more staff using our grants to help liaise with landlords, liaise with property developers to try and increase capacity in the area. So it's very, it's a moving feast depending on how big that gets. The obvious issue being that if somebody has significant arrears, they're going to be very hard to house because of their track record. But the other option is those have been in housing for a long time. Remember when this happened last time, something called the Mortgage Rescue Scheme. So this is something the council could do. So basically, if you're an owner occupier, you start defaulting on your mortgage company wants to default, we can actually buy the property and you rent your own property back to us after we've purchased it, and ourselves, RSLs, housing associations can get involved with that scheme if the government initiates it. So we'll have to see what happens, really.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. Has there been a significant rise during the lockdown in terms of arrears?
Yeah. So if we carry on as we are, we will be in debt by paying more than £400,000 than this time or year end last year. So that's quite a significant amount. As I wrote in the report, you'll see that rent arrears is not an issue while it's a current arrear, because you can always collect the rent while somebody's in the property. It's when they leave the property and leave the arrear, which then becomes a debt. And if that debt exists, that then is money that is basically taken from every other tenant within the district, because we only operate the housing department on rents coming in. So if somebody disappears owing us money, that's money taken out of the pockets of other tenants. The current highest rent, I think last year was something like £2,400. I think we're now got somebody clocking about 3,600. That's about 40 weeks arrears. So,
yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to bring in. I don't know if is Councillor Smallbridge there, or is Mrs. Smallbridge bringing him a cup of tea?
I'm assuming he's having some difficulties, Chair. He's keeps dropping in and out.
Well, what I'll do is I'll bring in Councillor Wilmot, and can I just express my disappointment with Councillor Wilmot, because it's the first time I've ever seen him not wearing a tie. John, you're looking very scruffy, but I'm going to bring you in. John's the Cabinet Member for Regulatory Services. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So some of the questions that's come out have been about the regulatory services. But first of all, I must impress on everybody what dedication this authority has been to fight against the battle of COVID-19. It has been a battle, a real battle, and I must say the dedication that the staff have done has been absolutely incredible. Can I say first of all about the pubs? The pubs were given some government guidelines, and which was sent to them by our licensing chief, Julian, who's done an absolutely brilliant job of sorting out some of the incidents. There has been a few incidents, but majority of the time, the pub landlords have done an excellent job in supporting the guidelines that have been set by the government. That, as I say, there has been a few social distancing problems. The pubs have been sent letters by Julian to just say that we know how hard you're trying, because when you get a sudden input at 10 o'clock at night of 50 people coming into your place, the landlords have got a problem. And they've been trying their very best to support everybody. And as I say, and the police have been out on a small number of cases and done a splendid job, not really making a hell of a mess on the situation. They've just supported everybody. And as I say, generally, the general public have been very good, but we have just a few social distancing problems. Can I just first of all say that thank you to the Environmental Health Service. Janet, who's in the lead officer there, has done a remarkable job with all the pubs, clubs and the food establishments. All have had to do very difficult jobs and put into place a lot of guidelines that normally they wouldn't have had to have done, but they've all done a splendid job. Can I also just say that how well the Baptist Church and the Under One Roof in Hucknall did supplying food to all the people. I personally phoned up 1,500 vulnerable people during this pandemic, and every time I put them, told them about an incident, they picked it up straight away and dealt with it splendidly. What a tremendous job, as I said, by everybody. And I'd also like to thank Paul and the private sector enforcement team have had a lot of work to do as well, as you might well imagine. And Paul's led that team very well. Thank you all for that. As I say, I'm a portfolio holder for regulatory services for this authority. Well done, all of you.
Thank you, John. And can I just ask you whether, I know that you attended a 100th birthday party yesterday at the George Street Club. Can I ask whether the 100-year-old lady obeyed social distancing rules?
She absolutely did.
Okay.
They actually came to me and said, how many people can we have at this do? I said, well, the place holds 200, but I'm telling you, you can only have 30.
I've still got bad memory. I've still got bad memories of you dancing to S Club 7 at the George Street Club, John. I'm going to bring in Councillor Shaw. If you just indicate if you'd like to speak again. Councillor Dave Shaw, please.
Yeah, I just want to pass on my personal thanks to the food banks in Hucknall while we're here, because I had the opportunity to actually liaise with food banks in the city to actually start supplying what they got overspill or spare, and bringing into the food banks in Kirkby, into Sutton and into Hucknall itself, and they've done a tremendous job themselves there. But what I'd like to have seen a bit more coordination between the food banks themselves, that they could rely on each other, and I don't think anybody thought about, have you got any spare food? Have you got any spare resources here? Can you come and help us? We're short of this, that and the other. And I think that was one of the main things there. And I just want to pass on my thanks to them. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what we can do as a committee. I do have a list that Sarah Daniels provided me with of every single voluntary organisation in the district, and maybe we should write to them as a committee if members would be agreed. I'm giving myself loads of jobs tonight, but I do think it's important to recognise. I actually spoke to every single organisation just to make sure that they applied. They were aware of the community coronavirus grant via the county council, and we probably brought in an extra 30 grand into the district as a direct result. And you know, I mean, some of the things that people were doing. I spoke to the 4x4. They call themselves a 4x4 squad. They're basically 4x4 owners who were delivering medication to elderly vulnerable residents. They were delivering food parcels, but they were also walking people's dogs. I hope that they left the 4x4 in the car park before they did that. But there's a lot of organisations that did a lot of good work, and you know, I think we should recognise. I'm going to bring Councillor Blagden in. Is there any other members of the committee before bringing Councillor Blagden? Councillor Rostance, are you okay? Yeah. Councillor Grounds, are you okay? Yeah. Okay. Councillor, well, I'm not going to bring Councillor Wilmore in again, to be honest. He's had his crack. Councillor Wilkinson, is there anything you'd like to add? Are you happy? Okay.
Am I okay to speak?
So again?
Am I okay to speak? I thought you brought
Yeah,
me in.
sorry, Councillor Grounds. Yeah, please.
No problem. I'm just wondering if the council is any closer or has any plans in place to reward the businesses that have protected their customers really well throughout the pandemic.
Thank you, and it's something that we did actually write to, as agreed at the last committee. We did actually write to Trevor Middleton, who's been coordinating the efforts on the ground. And you know, I think you did raise, for example, the barbers, and was it some sort of vape shop?
Yeah, barber vape shop
that had gone over above. And we did say at the time, Councillor Brown, that we hope that the public would reward these businesses by giving them the custom. You know, I mean, I went to a shop in Sutton yesterday, and I'm not going to say who it was, but the social distancing was woeful, and I've asked Trevor to just go in and give him a bit of advice. I don't know if Councillor Grounds' question is specifically about rewarding businesses. Is there any officer that would like to deal with that?
We've got Teresa Hodgkinson, Chair.
Okay, Teresa.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. I think it's a good suggestion. I know we're already looking at that. I think the next agenda is looking at town centres and business support. So if I could take that as an action, and maybe if I bring something back to look at how we can reward the businesses. I know that the Chief Exec, Carol Cooper-Smith, and Pete Hudson through the grants did write to all the businesses that's received grants, but it's wider than that. So gladly take that as an action and bring it back to the next committee.
Yeah, I mean, because there's some businesses like Morrison's, for example, have now realised how much they can. So I've got a meeting with them coming up in the next couple of weeks, where they're looking now at what they can do to help the community now, even when COVID's gone, because now they've realised that they can push that money towards helping a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. And you know, I mean, I've got the same experience with Lidl and Asda in Sutton in Ashfield. I think it's almost awoken their community conscience, which is really good. And so Asda have been undertaking additional litter picks in and around sort of the top of Outram Street, etc. I know that it's a bit of a thing for fly tipping. I'm going to bring in Councillor Blagden. Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can I just, before I ask a question, ask the question, Chairman, can I just say that I know there was some problems with the food banks and the communication problems, Councillor Shaw, but at the time, during that pandemic, we was in an unprecedented situation. Everybody was reacting. The government was reacting, we were reacting. Now we're in a situation where we can plan. And all that, I'm sure all that will come together now, and it'll come together naturally, I think, through planning, which we wasn't able to do before. But could I just say, what ongoing support are we planning to provide for local businesses?
I think we might have covered that early on, unless Carol, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll start, and Teresa can finish. She's got more of the detail than I have. We've recently appointed dedicated officers and set up an economic development hub, and they are experts in their field. I feel very fortunate to have bagged them, to be honest. We've got one person whose specific job it is to work with town centre retailers on an ongoing basis with Trevor Middleton, and another couple of officers who are working on enterprise and skills development and employment related stuff. So I'm really pleased that we've got a new team in post that are specific jobs that to work with large and small businesses and retailers alike. So we will be finding out what ongoing support needs they've got. And as Craig has mentioned, there's a new government scheme called Kickstart, where we'll hopefully be helping small businesses access extra support through young unemployed young people who will be able to get minimum wage jobs for 6 months and work experience. So there's a range of things that we can do.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Teresa, would you like to add anything to that?
Just to again say what I said before about the economic recovery plan that we've commissioned. We're just doing a route map at the moment so that we can understand that more, and that will see where the resource needs to go in the future. And if you have a look in your pack when you've got time in your leisure, there are a number of headings that we've already identified that we need to start working with, and they cover town centre recovery, regeneration, capacity and building, skills and training, and so on. And Carol's quite right that we're fortunate that we've got these two full-time people that are now looking at how they can drive forward the recovery plan. So at a later date, through this scrutiny panel, and like I said, business and town centres is next on the agenda, we'll be able to bring a bit more detail back on how and the actions we're going to do that.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. As I outlined at the last meeting of this panel, we'll be providing the Cabinet with updates of our discussions. If you remember back to our last meeting, every single COVID meeting will take place just before the Cabinet, so we can feed into that process. So we'll be feeding into the Cabinet updates of our discussions and views at the next meeting of the Cabinet, which is, I think it's a couple of weeks' time. You know, are there any comments or recommendations at this stage that the panel would like in that update? Anybody? Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Kevin Rostance. Councillor Rostance?
Yeah, it's just an update on, we've relied so heavily on volunteers and charities, and a lot of the national charities are struggling, but a lot of the local charities are really struggling. I'm involved with motor neuron disease. A lot rely on sort of local fundraisers, etc. And they are really struggling. They are all using their reserves now I don't know if there's any more that we can do to support especially the local charities. I say it's bad enough for the national ones, but the citizen advice and the rest of the people are all relying on monies they've got in the coffers at the moment to keep them going, just to keep them afloat. I don't know if we keep an eye on those, because they have been absolutely wonderful. All the volunteers, all the charity people have all got together. If we can bring that forward to the next meeting, just what can we do, and if we are doing enough to support them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you're right, Councillor Rostons, and I know that a lot of these charities are relying now on the reserves, of which are dwindling. And I know that the council of today's communities in place officially closed the coronavirus fund. So what I'd ask is maybe we could, at a future meeting, or we could ask the cabinet to assist us, but maybe sort of look at working together to identify extra revenue streams, because we haven't got £1 million, as I say, as Paul Parkinson quite rightly identified. You know, we're 400k down already, you know, with regards to people's rents. So I'd like to bring in Teresa, and then I'll bring in Mike, if that's okay. Teresa.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good suggestion, and we've got a community engagement team that are working with our voluntary and charities. What would you just say? We, as you're probably aware, we gave £10,000 to support the COVID response to our voluntary and charity sector. We've just relaunched another £10,000, so we've made a commitment. So if you are aware of any organisations that do need some funding, that is live at the moment, and it's open and available on our website, so I'm happy to share that.
Excellent. Okay, Mike Joy.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not sure if you're at this stage yet, but I've just been jotting down a few of the potential areas for you to bring up at Cabinet. Obviously, this forms part of your monthly update, and whilst it doesn't necessarily need to be specific recommendations, it can be comments, concerns or views that have been flagged up by this panel along the course of these meetings. So if I run through these, Chair, what I've got so far as specific concerns, and then if any members want to add anything to it or have got any concerns with that, at least then we've got an approach to go forward to the meeting of Cabinet on the 15th of September. Okay, Mike. So I think the first one I've got down is the writing to all of the food banks, expressing thanks in relation to their work throughout this pandemic.
I think can we extend that to community groups, Mike, or are you about to say that? Okay.
I've also got down, obviously, a recognition and concerns regarding homelessness and arrears, and particularly in light of when furlough comes to an end, how that may escalate. I've got consideration of the additional support that we could offer to small businesses, and that ties in with both the details of the next meeting, but also some of the points that were raised by Councillor Grounds. And also in relation to Councillor Rostons, consideration of what can be done further to support some of the local charitable organisations who are at the moment suffering extreme hardship and are in their reserves, some of which obviously may struggle to continue providing charitable assistance outside of this.
Okay, is there anything else that members would like to add to that? I'm flicking through. Councillor Rostons again.
Sorry, could we just add the churches together have been brilliant over all this. Can we just include those as well, because they rely on their sort of fundraisers for the churches, and they've worked really well together. And they again rely on coffee mornings and various things. They've had no revenue come in for things that they do. So if we can include those in that section. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chairman.
Certainly, yeah. Okay, is there anybody else like to raise anything? Okay, and the next meeting of the panel will be focusing on...
Sorry, Chair, we've got Councillor Wilmot who also wants to add something. I know he's not a member of the actual panel, but he's a portfolio holder, so we can
Right, Councillor, you've got 45 seconds. Go.
It's about this an outbreak of COVID-19 that's just taken place on our patch. Amazon.
John, can I just stop you there, because there is concern about an issue in the Ashfield district. However, we haven't got the full information. So I think that at this stage, we would rather, as a council, get the full information so that we can give accurate and timely information to residents. Does that sound okay? I'm sorry to stop you, John. Go on, unmic him.
I just wondered if anyone, any of the lead officers knew anything about it. That was all.
No.
I think that I think I can speak on behalf of the lead officers, if that's okay. Just to say, John, that we'll be clearer as to the situation tomorrow, and we shall email accordingly. Okay. Just to reassure Councillor Wilmot and the other members, this is all part of the early warning system, so lead officers are aware. It's still very early days, and we are collecting information. So it would be wrong of me to say things now when I'm not in full possession of all of the facts. But our environmental health team is working with the Director of Public Health for Nottinghamshire. So it's all part of the local outbreak control. So it's testing the system basically, but we will come back to members when we've got more information. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carol. So, as I say, at the next meeting, we'll be focused on small businesses and high street recovery. As I've mentioned before.
Sorry, Chair, could I interrupt? We have Councillor Smallridge back, and I know you haven't got to him with any potential questions. I don't know how long he's going to stay in.
Well, I tell you what, I'm absolutely delighted to see Councillor Smallridge. Did Mrs. Smallridge bring you that cup of tea? John, is there any questions that you would like to ask senior officers? Do you want to unmute him, Mike, if possible?
We have tried. I know he's having some difficulties, Chair.
Can you hear me? Put a thumbs up, John, if you can hear me. Can you hear me, John? Well, we'll
move on, Chair.
We'll have to do it by email. But yeah, as I say, we have got the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund has been mentioned tonight, which is set, hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, bring in significant investment and really kickstart the regeneration, the much needed regeneration of places like Sutton and Kirkby. However, we are aware, and it was addressed at the last meeting, we should be working hard to support existing traders. Now, it's already come up about the support of the extra member of staff and the hard work of Trevor Middleton and his team. But the next meeting, we'll be inviting 4 small businesses, one from Sutton, one from Kirkby, one from Hucknall, and one from the Selston rural area to the meeting to discuss their experiences and what we can do to help them. So that'll be the next meeting. Does anyone else have anything else to add before I bring in Councillor Blagden? Anyone else? Put your hands up. John, can you hear me again? Put your thumbs up if you can hear me. John Smallridge, that is. No, okay. Well, can I bring in Councillor Blagden then? Councillor Blagden, you've got a specific question.
Yes, I have, Chairman. Thank you for letting me ask it. Can I ask a short question about the local government reorganisation? This is part of the terms of reference of the panel. I do understand that this will be coming back to the panel in more detail at a later stage. But can you give us a brief update on any progression of the local government reorganisation agenda, and what communications have the council had with central government and the county council? I think it's Craig.
Yeah, Craig, would you like to deal with this question?
Thank you. The very quick update is that we are currently awaiting publication by the government of the Devolution and Local Recovery White Paper, which we keep being told that we should be expecting to see that this month. Within that white paper, we're told or led to believe that the government will outline its plans for local government reorganisation, which will be based on intrinsic links involving an increase in unitary councils whilst empowering town and parish councils, devolution of powers to unitary councils and or combined authorities, mayoral requirements and provision of additional combined authorities. Separately to that, in the media, it's been reported, mainly by Simon Clark, who's the Minister with responsibility for local government, that a suggested optimum population size for any new unitary councils will be a minimum of 300,000 with an optimum size of 400 to 500,000, though 600,000 has also been mooted. I think all members will be well aware that in advance of the white paper, there is quite considerable activity taking place, which is leading to quite a plethora of proposals and counter proposals involving local authorities, whether that be county councils, district councils, existing smaller unitary councils, on the future provision of unitary authorities. For example, Somerset, North Yorkshire, Gloucestershire, Warwickshire, to name but a few. In terms of your last part about communications with the county council and central government, are we still live? I've not personally had any communications with county council, central government. Carol may like to add to that.
Okay, not on this issue. We work with the county council on normal business every day, but we've not discussed local government reorganisation with them at an officer level. There could well be discussions going on at a political level, but we've not had officer meetings with the county council about local government reorganisation. We at Ashfield have had no discussions with government ministers, although I expect that when the white paper is published, there'll be a plethora of activity at that point. And like every other district council in the country, we are working through our network association, which is the district council's network.
Okay, thanks, Carol. And you know, I do think that it is appalling that the county council have not chosen to engage with this council. And I look forward. I mean, I do find it ironic that the white paper is called the recovery and devolution, because this is doing the opposite. You know, I mean, it's centralising services in a massive power grab, and it's my view. And you know, I don't want to be political because, as you know, I'm not political. However, I do think that it's creating a democratic deficit that will lead to residents in the Ashfield district suffering from poorer service. But I won't go into it because we are going to cover this at length in the next meeting, if that's okay, Craig, because we will be clear about what the government's plans are. So the next meeting will be looking at small businesses, and it will also look at local government reorganisation, because as Councillor Blackman said, it is in the terms of reference of this group. So that will be covered in the next meeting. Is there anything that members would like to raise on this? No. Okay then. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance in the meeting. I did say that this was the first council meeting since the middle of March that has actually been chaired from the empty council chamber. It's a bit scary and spooky, actually. I've just seen the ghost of, I was going to say the ghost of John Wilmot, but I can see him actually. So, so thank you very much to all our senior officers today. And as I said at the start of the meeting, it just goes to show the importance that this council do attach to this committee. So I look forward to meeting you next month. And of course, if there's any other issues that members or panel members would like to see included on the future agenda, please feel free to email me. Can I thank as well, by the way, because this is the first meeting I've ever attended at Ashfield District Council where Lynn is not around. So I'd like to thank Lynn's apprentice, Shane, who's been taking the minutes tonight. I look forward to checking their accuracy at a later date. Thank you to Mike as well, Democratic Services. And if there's nothing else, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.